Nearly everyone has heard of the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. That's mainly because Henry Wadsworth Longfellow wrote a poem about it soon after it happened. But far fewer people know that 2 years later, a 16-year-old girl rode much farther over rougher roads. Alone and unarmed, Sybil Ludington raced through the night for freedom. This is the story of Sybil Ludington's outdistancing Paul Revere. And I'm Jake Storielli. This is Laughs from the Past.
Is that your Boston accent?
It was kind of. It went in between like Boston and New York a little bit, and then I think.
Well, it takes place in Connecticut, so there you go.
I think, I was trying to depict an old drunkard at the bar telling a story about Sybil Ludington, and someone being like, "Oh, I'm not listening to you."
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Laughs from the Past, Season 4, Episode 6, I believe. Episode 6. Last week we were in the 1970s. We are back to the 1700s here. The 1770s, I believe, to be exact. Going back in time. This season of Laughs from the Past is all about children who made history, children who did crazy things. My name's Jimmy. Co-host is Jake. He brought you the intro. Thanks for stopping by and tuning in.
Hey.
Have you ever heard of Sybil Ludington before, Jake?
I have not.
I hadn't either, and maybe I have, but I don't remember it. But I Googled her name because I saw it in one book we had, and I wanted to see what other sources said. And I Googled her name, and I have the Wikipedia up. And then as I was Googling, like, there's been a drunk history about her. There's been a lot of stories. I think a movie was made about her. So it seemed like she was well covered. So just slipped through the cracks. I never heard of her. And it's an interesting story with a lot of doubt behind it.
Okay. So there's a chance that this didn't happen?
Huge chance. That's something we're going to discuss as well.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. So like you said in the intro, it's like 2 years after Paul Revere did his famous ride, which I believe Paul Revere didn't even finish his ride. Did you know that?
Now you're calling out Paul Revere.
I believe Paul Revere is only known because his name rhymed in the song that was written about him.
Paul Revere's ride. Is that what I'm Googling right now?
Yeah. I think the real story is Paul Revere didn't actually make it. Someone else made it. He was in the party that was supposed to ride and warn. There was 2 other people, and they did it, but someone wrote a poem about him, the famous poem, and Paul Revere's name rhymed, so he gets all the credit.
Yeah, Paul Revere never shouted the phrase, "The British are coming." He rode northward in secrecy. His journey ended in Lexington, where he met with John Hancock and Samuel Adams. So I think he did some warning, but you're right. I mean, probably what you think about Paul Revere's ride didn't happen is mostly embellished from that poem from HWL, one of my favorites.
So Revere started the ride with 2 other people, William Dowes and Samuel Prescott. And Jesus, I can't stop coughing. By the end, he had 40 people with him, and they were all shouting and running, right? But then the British were onto them, so they split up, and Revere never reached Concord, which was the final goal, which is what the poem says. He was overtaken by the British, and he was actually detained by the British at Lexington and Dowes. And Prescott, a young physician who is believed to have died in the war several years later, he's the one that made it all the way to Concord. But no one knows the name Samuel Prescott because it did not rhyme in the poem that Henry Wadsworth Longfellow wrote. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Like, awesome break for Revere when he hears that poem, and he's like, hell yeah, I did that.
Yeah, sorry, Prescott. We couldn't really work your name in, brother.
So Paul Revere has already taken a beating on this show. Just ruined his legacy for anyone that did not know the truth.
Tough.
And now we have a 16-year-old girl that ousted him by like 30 miles, apparently.
Yeah, one-upped him pretty good.
Yeah, and this is cool because this is an area that you and I are familiar with. Danbury, Connecticut, Ridgefield, Connecticut. Did you ever even realize that like that was part of the Revolutionary War when you live around there? It's always weird to kind of think about.
Yeah, not really. I think it's I don't know. It's just funny. You and I have lived on, different parts of this country. Like I lived in Dallas for a while, which is funny that like I don't know. Dallas doesn't really have that history tied to it. In the Northeast, it's almost so much around you that you don't think about it anymore. Like, you'll see an old building, and they'll be like, yeah, Paul Revere, had 2 beers at that place. And you're like, oh, all right, cool. And, like, Dallas doesn't have that. And I think Denver's kind of funny because the roots of Denver, where I'm at now, is like gold rush. So you get a lot of...
It's people that went west for the gold rush, saw the Rocky Mountains, and said, fuck that.
I'm gonna stop here.
We'll just set up shop here.
So it's kind of funny. Denver's roots are that, or it's people that are like, it was your enjoy your last beer before heading into the mountains because you had no idea what the hell you were getting into.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny seeing those different roots in the different cities. But yeah, I mean, in the Northeast, you're just it's so much there that you like stop thinking about it. It's just there.
Yeah, but there's the place where we go pick apples from, and I think Caitlin and I are going to go pick strawberries this weekend.
Nice.
Is Battlefield, I always say this word wrong, orchards. Yeah. Which is like the Revolutionary Battle took place there. Blows my mind.
Yeah.
It's why whatever. It's hard to relate to some history because it seems so far away, but we have Sybil Ludington. We'll get to the story here, okay?
All right.
So during the Revolutionary War, Britain was trying to take over New England. If they could like get that New York area by like, where the Long Island Sound is and Connecticut, and they could chop it right there, and New England would be the head of the snake chopped off, like that was great for the Britain. That was their strategy. So they're trying to attack in that area, which is kind of where you live, like Milford, Danbury, like, like that.
Yeah.
It's that southwest area of Connecticut. And at one point they attack Danbury, Connecticut, and they're burning it down. So there's this rider, and he's just like, shit, we need to get a militia. We need to get a militia going. So he rides to Sybil Ludington's father's house. See if I can find his name.
Dad.
Dad Ludington, Mr. Ludington.
Dad Ludington.
Because he fought in the French Indian War a couple years earlier, so he was in charge of the local militia, getting it together and all that stuff. And they need to get the militia to pick up arms and get ready to fight because the Battle of Danbury is taking place. So that kind of sets the scene. It'll be easier. I'm just going to kind of skim through the Wikipedia so I don't miss out on any fun facts for us to talk about. But that's kind of where we're at right now. Henry Ludington, that's his name. He was a colonel in the New York militia who had George Washington to dine several times at his home. And his daughter, Sybil, would listen in on these meetings with George Washington. He had the militia at his house, and they would drill. They would run their drills in the field, and Sybil would watch. She was very much a part of it, and it was happening.
Remember
all
the
around
Titans?
Yeah, remember. Yeah, it was a great call. We got to remember the Titan situation. Her dad. Now, this wasn't like one town's militia. Like he would go from Danbury to New York to Ridgefield, like all around that area.
Brewster.
So she would. Brewster. Yeah, she would go with.
You got to get beers after midnight.
A lot of people, if you're not from Connecticut, they don't serve out. They don't. You can't buy beer after. It was 8 o'clock. Now it was 8. Then it was 9. When we were in college, it was 9. Yeah. So if you're drinking that night, you gotta really know you're drinking.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you got to go to Brewster to get beers. Did that a lot. All right. let's go into the story. On April 26th, 1777, Sybil Ludington rode her horse Star. Good horse name.
Good horse name.
40 miles through the night in Putnam County, New York, to warn approximately 400 militiamen under her father's command that the British troops were planning to attack Danbury, Connecticut, where the Continental Army had a supply depot. On her way to gather her father's troops, she warned the people of Danbury. So he's like, I can't, when her dad, Henry, gets told, he's like, I can't leave the house. Like, I got to organize the battle and the attack. I need someone that knows all the houses. And she's like, I know where they all live because I've been doing this with you. I'll do it. So sends his 16-year-old daughter on a 40-mile ride. And it was raining, of course.
Always.
Yeah. So a little background. Her dad had fought in the French and Indian War. What are your thoughts on the French and Indian War, Jake?
It was neither French nor Indian, right?
French were involved. It was basically the French versus the British, and the Indian helped the French.
Right.
And her dad was probably on the British side.
Right, when we were still friends there. Yeah, you'd be surprised to hear that I don't have my strongest opinions about the French-Indian War.
Well, a quick summary is Britain spent so much money on the French-Indian War, and it was like 7 years, I think, and they spent so much money trying to take over that land from the French that they were out of money and in turn had to tax their colonists more, which then led to the American Revolution.
How about that?
All kind of ties in a little bit.
Yeah.
So he had fought for the French-Indian War. He volunteered to head the local militia during the American Revolution. Sybil had to move from town to town following her father and unknowingly played an important role in the success of the colonies. The afternoon after she warned residents of Danbury, the British troops burned down 3 buildings and destroyed multiple houses, but did not kill many people. Little was told of Ludington's ride. The only record of this event was written by her great-grandson. Her ride started at 9 p.m. and ended around dawn in a bad storm. Prior to her famous ride, Sybil saved her father from capture. Now, this is a wild story. So before the ride, she had already saved her father, a loyalist named Ichabod Prosser. And go ahead. You like that
the
name?
Headless Crosser. Well known.
Ichabod Prosser, the Headless Crosser. And 50 other loyalists. So they were colonists that sided with the British. Like, nah, we don't want to be free. We like the British. They tried to capture her father. But Sybil lit candles around the house and
How
organized
casually
her...
did you say that? They tried to capture her father.
Yeah.
Oh.
well, it is war.
Yeah. Yeah, the other day they swang by. They tried to take my father. What young Sybil do?
This is what she said. They said she does. She lit candles around the house and organized her siblings to march in front of the windows in military fashion, creating the impression of many troops guarding the house.
She did the original Home Alone. That's what we're giving Sybil Ludington credit for.
Yeah, that seems.
She had the Michael Jordan thing going by the mirror, and they're like, "Whoa!"
I just don't
MJ
get
in there.
How Ichabod wasn't like, why are your daughters marching around your house? It's not like it's not like a silhouette of a 15-year-old girl. I would hope it wouldn't trick me into thinking it was a military man in a uniform.
You would hope.
I would hope.
Yeah, it feels like we're missing a couple deets there. Like right now we've got like 3 kids just marching back and forth in front of the windows.
And I'm guessing Sybil's the oldest of all the children. So now we're thinking about like 12-year-olds, 14-year-olds. 50 loyalists outside the window, apparently scared off by 4 kids marching in front of candlelight. It just doesn't add up.
Doesn't fully add up because, yeah, I mean, you gotta... I don't know. I guess if you do some fun things with the lightings and the blinds, you could get some good shadows going. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it says
I want to believe it, but you're right. It's tough.
It says the loyalists fled. Also, in her father's memoir, he states that Sybil and her sister would sit in the fields, hidden with loaded rifles and pistols to guard the home from kidnappers who were after their father. Dude was a wanted man. That's more believable.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm still pretty freaked out. I'm just walking around knowing people want to kidnap you.
Yeah. Welcome
It's
to
a
Mexico.
bad feeling.
Welcome to Mexico.
Yeah.
He had a 100-pound sterling bounty for his capture. Now that makes more sense.
Yeah. Okay.
He has a bounty on his head. And it was a huge sum for the time. At the time, this was Westchester County, and the boundary with the British was only about 25 miles away, and no man's land where the terrorizing cowboys and skinners roamed around White Plains. So we're 25 miles away, and we're basically playing capture the flag, and there's a flag across the river that's worth a lot of money.
Capture the flag with horrible guns of the time. And, yeah, go.
Yeah, just make sure that, sometimes he has an entire military army walking back and forth in front of his windows, so be careful of that. Is that not a ridiculous story? That cannot be true.
I guess here's the thing that I'm trying to put together on that. If you're, all right, you got 50 people, but maybe, and again, if we're thinking about this, like, if that bounty was on his head, maybe they're standing there thinking like, yo, this guy must be protected. They must have a full house in there. And like if they have, maybe there's some blinds closed and you got the reflections on the lights and it just looks like, think about it this way. If you're outside, this guy's got $100 silver bounty on his head or whatever.
Yeah.
And you look in there and all you see is a bunch of shadows marching back and forth. You're kind of like, okay, this dude's got people protecting him, right?
Yeah, but you should be able to be like, they're kids.
I don't know. Again, these are boring times, so like I feel like I'd be really good with my shadow usage back then.
They definitely practiced that.
Oh,
that was like TV. Shadow
That
puppets.
was TV. Shadows were the original television. These kids were good with shadows.
It's a good call. Makes me change a little bit. So anyway, back to her ride now. She rode a total of 40 miles in the hours of darkness through Carmel, New York, onto Mahopac, then to Kent Cliffs and Farmer's Mill, and finally back home. She used a stick to prod her horse and knock on the doors. She returned home, soaked with rain and exhausted, but most of the 400 soldiers were ready to march. So instead of getting off her horse and knocking on the door, she would just ride up to the front door with a stick and bang on it, and they'd come back and hold on. In this other source I have, it had like they acted as if they know the words that she said, which no one does.
Okay,
but
yeah, because it's got to be a code word, right?
No, it was pretty basic, but there was a word I remember. Okay, the British are burning Danbury. Muster at Ludington's. But I never heard muster used that way.
Muster at Ludington's. It's like, so yeah, they're using muster there as get together, as a rendezvous point.
Yeah. I've always I never heard it as got to put some muster on it, I know that.
Muster up at Ludington's.
Yeah. And then that book says they would offer and okay, do you need a break, Sybil? Looks like you've been riding around like crazy. And she was like, no. I must
Sybil
ride
Ludington
on.
Doesn't take breaks.
Oh, wow.
I'm trying to kidnap my father.
The official first definition of the word muster was to assemble troops.
Wow, look at that.
Yeah, that is not how I use it today.
No. I guess when you muster up the courage for something, that's building up the courage. That's gathering up the courage.
Yeah. That's how I use it. Just to come on.
Together, kind of.
Grind down. Yeah, but that's how it's weird how it changed over time. So 400. So she rode to the houses of the main men of each town, I guess. And it was get your town organized and go to Ludington's, which is really my dad's.
Right.
The American militia arrived too late to save Danbury, but they were able to drive General William Tryon and his men to the Long Island Sound. I think they went on. There was another battle after it, so they were late to the Battle of Danbury. Sorry,
Whoops.
Couldn't save you, but Sybil did her damnedest. And then they actually moved on. And I think it's the Battle of Ridgefield, Jake. They missed the British at Danbury, but they finally fought and defeated them at Ridgefield, Connecticut a few weeks later. Ridgefield, rich town, rich with history as well. Defeated the British there. All right, so that's the story, basically.
Okay.
Right? Now this says Ludington was congratulated by her heroism by friends and neighbors and also by General George Washington. Okay?
It's pretty big. Big shout out from GW at the time.
Yes, that is big. Well, she was friends with her dad.
Right. But still, I mean, GW giving you some love. You put that on Instagram, that's getting big likes.
Yeah. So the problem here is it's a great story. It's awesome. And if Sybil did it, I'll feel bad about doubting it. But the only reason we know this story is because her great-grandson wrote about it years later. It was never written about at the time. And her dad wrote about it in his memoir. On page 90 of the memoir, it relates that after a rider from Danbury came knocking in the middle of the night, the colonel asked his daughter, Sybil, who had just turned 16, to alert the militia and have them meet at home. The story was first published in 1880, so we're 100 years later, by local historian Martha Lamb, to whom it was told by Ludington's descendants. And then after that, her great-grandsons wrote about it in their own little book. So we go 100 years before this is documented.
I guess here's what I'd say. I mean, would there be any reason at the time that they would bury this story?
It didn't happen.
Well, no, I'm saying case they needed or wanted to do this again, like they wouldn't let people know about it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No. So there is. I read about this. This was a time where any woman who helped with the war efforts was usually written about. So they wasn't trying to hide like a 16-year-old girl saved the day. Like they wouldn't be ashamed of that if that's what you're like. They would.
No, I'm not thinking of a shame point. I'm thinking more so of like secrecy. Like if they were like, oh, this worked really well, we should have a 16-year-old girl in each town ready to do this, you know? And the British would never think about that or something along those lines.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Like I'm looking for a reason why they wouldn't initially tell this story.
I think it didn't really happen to the extent we're hearing it.
Okay. Whenever
you have something in the retelling, it gets longer. It's my favorite quote from Seabiscuit. Everything gets longer in the retelling.
Right.
Did Sybil ride around and save people and alert people? Probably, because I don't think it got made up out of thin air. Was it 40 miles in the pitch dark on a horse named Star and she was using sticks to knock on the window? That sounds like a lot of details that get, built up in, it was a rainy night. That sounds like a lot of stuff that gets built up in the retelling.
Yeah. That's you're right. I mean, there's the distance over those first the 100 years before this story gets told, the distance traveled, a lot of the numbers probably get cooked. Like, dude, you just mentioned the 50. Who counted the 50 military men that were going to break into their house? You know what I'm saying? Or were there 10 guys and the kids reported it the next day and they were like, oh, yeah, there must have been 50 of them out there, Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. A lot of multiple. So I think we've got a realistic story with a lot of multipliers.
Well, think about what those loyalists outside the window reported in their British newspapers. We tried to kidnap Henry Ludington, but he had a militia in his house of midgets.
There's probably an article on ESPN London that was like, is Ludington the kingpin? He had 200 guys protecting him at his house.
Yeah. Right, but that is like what being a history major is like, who's telling the story? Where did they hear it from? Why are they telling it? You need to take all that in. So with the fact that this comes from her dad and her grandchildren and all her relatives, they're the only ones for 100 years that retold this story. It sounds like modern folklore. She probably helped because I don't think they made it up of thin air, but some of the details are a bit crazy.
We've got some multipliers for sure.
We do have like Sybil's future after this.
Okay.
She married Edmund Ogden, old Edodge, in 1784 when she was 23, and they had a son named Henry. Edmund was a farmer and innkeeper, according to various reports. In 1792, the family settled in the Catskills, where they lived until her death on February 26th at the age of 77. Her tombstone shows a different spelling of her first name.
Where's she buried?
Patterson, New York. Patterson Presbyterian Cemetery.
Should we go there?
I love a good cemetery. So this became like a huge story, and there's statues of her, and she got all this credit because it's a great story if it's true. But then a lot of historians had to come and play Debbie Downer and like, well, come on, guys, like let's think about this. I don't know if this is really all that true.
I mean, what's fun for me when I hear some stuff from history, like I'm wondering, like right now in my head, the scene from Home Alone where he does, he's got the Michael Jordan on the train and he's making it look like there's a party going on in the house. Did whoever helped write Home Alone know anything about the Sybil Ludington story? Because, I mean, it's a direct copy and paste.
Kinda, yeah.
Kinda
is. I'm trying to find if there's any. So, like, I was watching this I typed in YouTube, and I was watching this little, like, PBS special where they're talking about her. And It pissed me off because I had a bunch of historians who are better than this talking in their, like, talking heads, and, like, Sybil was a girl who wasn't gonna back down. She was a girl. I was like, no one, you don't know that. No one, you don't.
You've just put that together through this 1.5 story.
Yeah, you don't know what kind of girl she was. Let's talk about the general, like, shape of war. Like, this is how it happens. They just, like, burn down. Like, you had to ride someone did have to do this if it was civil. Like, you would have to ride house to house and just wake up in the middle of the night and, like, all right, let's go fight in your own house. It's crazy. I know this still happens places today, but it's just nuts.
Yeah, I mean, I got shook when you mentioned that mid-episode. Just like that's a tough life. If you knowing there's a bounty on your head is a tough life.
I got the Battle of Ridgefield up, which is what this helped win. It says it actually would be a different part of Connecticut now. Westport.
Oh, really?
Westport, Connecticut was
okay.
Ridgefield.
So I'm same area.
Same area.
Yeah.
Well, Wikipedia's got so much info, but they won. British returned to the fleet. Take that, British
suckers.
The militia.
Well, we don't have any bloody references and accents.
Would you want to be part of the militia? Would you want to be part of like the federal army?
I think I'm a militia guy. I think I'm a definite. Again, like I'm not your guy in the militia that you're like, all right, let's listen to him. But I think I'm enjoyed in the militia for entertaining and trying to keep things light.
You get to live your everyday life, live at home, and then like you just get waken up in the middle of the night by a 16-year-old girl. It says, "Muster at Ludington's. They're burning down Danbury."
Muster at Ludington's.
Did burn down Danbury, huh?
Yeah, Danbury's burning. It's pretty crazy. Been there.
Probably some sheds. What do you burn down?
Everything was made out of wood. I think once you get the fire going.
Pretty easy.
Yeah.
So, do you think Sybil Ludington's a hero? Some places scrapped her, Jake, of like this heroism. They like had let me find it. They had like legacy in her honors, and then they took it away.
They took away her, I was going to say nobility. What are we calling it? They took away her achievements?
Basically. The DAR chapter, which is Daughters of the American Revolution, which is like about all the women that helped the American Revolution and stuff like that. Because I'm telling you, this was like big. Like if you were a woman that helped out, you were written about. So they said the evidence was not strong enough to support their criteria for a war heroine, and they removed a book about her from their headquarters. The Daughters of American Revolution chapter near her historic home says that her exploit was documented, and it continues to honor her. So the chapter that's by her hometown says, no, we're not losing our hero. And everywhere else is like, seems fishy.
Yeah, sure she was nice, but
They said the story of the lone teenage girl riding for freedom, it seems, is simply too good to not be believed.
Yeah, I mean maybe it's okay to believe it. You know, a little girl power, a little empower young women.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've got a couple holes.
She looks pretty bad in the statue they made of her. Now, it's hard to make a good-looking statue these days. But if I just sent it to you, if I see the statue that they have in New York, I'm scared of that little girl. She's also riding side saddle, which is funny. Did not picture that. I was picturing this in my head the entire time. I had her riding the horse regular. If she rode the whole way side saddle, that's kind of nuts.
Are we giving her points for that?
That's kind of nuts. How you got to fall off 40 mile side saddle?
Oh, wow. Her statue is powerful.
Yeah, they made her a heroine for sure.
Yeah, she's like Braveheart.
It's scary, right? Like that girl shows up at your front door in the middle of a rainy night and you think you're about to die, not get rounded up for war.
I mean, they're depicting her like if you could have thrown Sybil Ludington in like one of the Game of Thrones fight scenes and been like, okay, from this statue of her.
Yeah. And the stick that this statue they've put in her hand, that's doing nothing. That's way too, if your stick is that short, you might as well just knock with your hand. I was picturing a stick, Jake.
Go on.
Like I was picturing like 4-foot stick.
Yeah, the stick is a little too close to being a wand than a stick.
Yeah. The horse looks miserable. Why does the horse get no credit?
Horse is having a bad time. Yeah, we don't get the horse's name at all.
Well, they said it was Star, but no one believes that.
Oh, that's right. Star. Oh, so we do think this is Star. I don't know. I'd like to think Star is mentioned somewhere near that statue.
Okay.
Because that's everyone's first question, right?
Yeah, but they said the horse's name wasn't actually Star. That's made up.
So we're already getting made up facts.
The whole thing. So the latest historian, Paula Hunt, says she doesn't say whether the story is accurate, but she does state that many popular details are fiction, such as the horse named Star, the stick in her hand, and the 40-mile distance.
Yeah, I'm looking at some of the plaques now. I'm not seeing anything about the horse, which, again, was a big part of whatever truths are involved in this story.
Good for the horse. I think that's the story. I think that's all we got. It's a shorter one today. And I don't know if this was nice or mean. Did we discredit Sybil, or did we give her enough credit? I do think she did something.
Yeah, she did something. Definitely patrolled the horse a little bit. Probably during the nighttime. And her and her siblings fended off, 5 guys that tried to kidnap her dad. So we'll give her credit there too.
Yeah, that's the old candle window trick.
I guess what I'm picturing is 100 years later, when the family comes out with all this stuff, they're probably going through some of the notes, some old diaries, and they're like, "Wow, great grandma Sybil was a badass."
Oh, I have it as just verbal storytelling. Let's hear the story about Grandma again.
I think they found something. I think they found an old diary or something. Because didn't you read something from, you said page 90 of the book they came out with or something?
Her dad's memoirs, yeah.
Right. So, I mean, we've got some notes and some details, but I'm picturing like, all right, so the family's like, hey, I think we could sell this or make it a book or something, get some money out of this. And they were like, in Sybil's journal entry, she was like, yeah, and there were 5 men outside the window trying to kidnap our dad. And they were like, let's just throw a 0 in here and kind of let's multiply this one. Let's call it a 50 burger.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's how a lot of history is. I think that's how I do a lot of things. Like, yeah, I was 45-minute drives become hour drives. It's just how the mind works.
Yeah.
Yep. Cool. That ends this one. We'll be back next week with another tale from history. I want to move on to a new season soon, but I don't want to get daunted by all the work of it. But I have so much fun stuff planned for future seasons of Blast from the Past. I'm excited about them, but I got to do a lot of work before we get there. If you have any children in history's stories, any requests, I will be taking them. Because they're kind of hard to come by. Like, someone's like, Beethoven wrote a song at 9 or Mozart or whatever. It's like, yeah, but was it good? And then what do we talk about? Good song.
Good tunes.
All right. See you guys. Thank you for listening. We'll be back next Tuesday. As always, have a good one.